Over the years, I've started and stopped a lot of different Unreal projects for different reasons. Technical limitations, bad game design that I discovered by actually implementing it, or hard drive failure. I'll show you a few of them, my goals in the project, why I stopped, and how it influenced my current project. This first project called Electric Space, the idea is that you have a spaceship that has all these like parts that you've wired up together, and that so you control the buttons, you control the functionality. It has echoes of definitely where Project Airship was going. Let me just show you how it kind of worked. So the idea was, so you'd have buttons here and then a light, and so this is just kind of me prototyping this. So if I press E, I can turn on and off a light. You can wire and unwire things. So if I hook this up to a splitter and an AND gate, it doesn't go because this value isn't positive. This is always like a constant instead of this one being a button. So you can turn on and off lights, and the same thing with like an OR. So this will turn it on, or that one. And so it was a neat idea. Additionally, I worked on trying to make like a laser system, so you could remotely power it without wires. And so it was just kind of like another kind of wire, basically. But the goal was to basically build, a power system that the player can control. Additionally, I have echoes of my first building system where I was learning to align things on a grid. I had a fluid system that isn't working right now. But yeah, this idea was pretty cool. It was way too ambitious for a starting project. I think I could have got the logic working, but I was learning about event dispatchers, and it becomes incredibly complex just to even understand where power is. I started adding like variable power so the light would dim and stuff. And it didn't seem like it was going to be tenable. I kind of needed a manager for all the different objects. And was like, I need to think of a simpler way to handle this. So that's just electronic space, and you can kind of see how some of the ideas carry over. This next project is called Town Builder. The idea was a colony management sim. The player would control a bunch of NPCs. Each NPC would have a task. So this one's mining and putting blocks on here. When they were hungry, they'd go get food, and they'd heal and stuff like that, sleep. I had all these different like Sims-like parameters. One of the core features of it was this conveyor belt system. So the player would mine stuff, or the NPCs, and they would attach to this belt. They'd move. They get into these storages. So they get like kind of like reduced into a kind of storage. So lots of simulating objects that went into this. The belts were a little tricky to do. I spent a lot of work on those. There's still problems with them. You see like things get stuck in corners. Really, the main issue was I had blocks bigger than the belts, so that was things to fix. I had stopped this project for a couple different reasons. One of them being the AI was having some issues. I actually fixed it right before doing this. The individual meshes were affecting the navigation. The building system got a little weird. So the player could build things, but it would, it was all based on a grid, and so as soon as you wanted to do something that was like a little off the grid, or like rotations and stuff were challenging. I ended up later fixing this in other projects, but yeah, there was a lot of different things here that were really cool. Now that I fixed the AI, and maybe I can look at the belts again, there might be something I can salvage from this and add to the airship game. This prototype was called Kill the King. I used an advanced locomotion system, so it looks a lot better than some of my other projects. The idea was that you kill this king in here every time that you killed the king, depending on how you did it. If you broke a window, if you shot people in the head, we'd start barring the windows, giving people helmets, so on and so forth. Each of the NPCs in the town had a different job and role, so they had all these properties that determined what they would do. So these people didn't have a job, so they became drunks at a tavern, and they would sit at chairs as drunks. This is a bartender he'd walk over here. So as time moves on, you see there's kind of like a timer in the middle, or in the middle of the screen. They would move back to their house at the end of the day. So the town was kind of procedural. There's different jobs. So like I said, there's also a guard. So if I shoot this guard, he warns the guards next to him. They're both going to aim at me and try to kill me. And they're shooting. But as they shoot, they should warn some of these other guards. But if I just kill this king here, the aiming's not great. And so I shot him. They're shooting each other. Lots of different AI issues. I learned a lot about AI during this project. But yeah, you can see now all the people are going to their jobs at the start of the day. And so it resets each time. Lots of other systems, like I was working on a stealth system. So if I run up here, and so this guard will look at you because I have a bow, and he doesn't like that. But if I crouch and hide, you see he isn't looking at me. So each guy has a set of like eyes that check for different weapons. So if I see something attached, it shouldn't be attached. The challenge with this one wasn't so much the AI. It was actually I wanted to procedurally build a town. That was much more complicated than I thought. I could do it on a grid, but as soon as I wanted to do something asymmetric, so I spent a lot of time reading about how asymmetric procedural generation works. And with that, I just ended up losing some interest here. I thought the idea was very cool. I think I could have done it all on a grid, and it looked very grid-like and have been fine. I got a little too ambitious with how I wanted to do procedural generation, and I think that's really what killed this project for me. I should have continued with smaller ambitions. This project is called Airlock. The idea was a heist game in space. So what you would do is you go to these little space stations and try to raid them. Each ship has its own gas model. So if I open and close this in this airlock, there's zero pressure. If I open it, we're going to see some force lines as gas moves into here. It's not exactly one because this wasn't pressurized back up to one, and there's a difference in volume, but it tries to figure out roughly what it would be. So then you can move items around in here. So I can pick up this. There's physics objects. And I can switch between different outfits. So it was a stealth game, so you could be like a janitor on the space station or a guard or something like that. If you shoot enemies, they drop blood. And when you pick up the blood and you walk around, you would make little footsteps everywhere, which you could clean up. I was exploring with different options on how to do that. I remember that one being relatively challenging. When you shoot out windows in a pressurized room, it should launch you to space. That was actually probably one of the hardest parts about this, trying to figure out how to move gas through a larger opening. Everything was around pinholes, is what I can find on the internet. So I was trying to build a model for that. I have some ideas now, but I haven't explored this project in a little while. The problem that I actually have with this project, I ended up solving way later and just didn't realize I solved it. But I wanted to have moving objects on platforms. This led me down this huge rabbit hole that ultimately led to the separate physics scenes. But that's why I was able to get Airship going so quickly. Is I wanted to have the player get onto these different ships. Let me see if I can get to it. It's kind of hard to get to it. It stops right now, but there'd be little ships that the player can move around like cars around the bigger stations. And because of that, I ended up so many challenges trying to move the player around with zero gravity, as well as character movement and trying to manage all those different states. It was a cool project, but now that I know how to solve some of the problems, maybe I can come back to it. I'm going to say that with each one of these. I end up building the same kind of systems because the kind of things I like in games excite me. The gas system was something that I thought was really cool. I'd like to really revisit that and figure out how to actually move gas through a space. I could not find much in physics books about how to do that. There is for pinhole leaks, you can figure out how gas would diffuse. But for large open space, like explosive decompression, I didn't find a lot there. So I was trying to figure that out on my own. It would be a fun project to revisit. This next one's called Train Game. The idea was very similar to the airship game where the player moves on a train. I figured this was probably one of the least complicated kinds of vehicles to build. I originally wanted to build this all on a moving car that the character would drive around the world and had physics and stuff, and it was so difficult to get that going. So this train system that I found in a kit worked relatively well. You can move around between the train. You can hop over here. You can't exactly see it, but the player is actually being simulated in a different environment. So this is my first time actually figuring out this physics scene that worked actually relatively well. If the player hops off though, they don't really go back to the real world. I was gonna have them die as soon as they jumped off their train. The reason I stopped this project was mostly just because this train asset I was using was incredibly challenging to use. I had to modify it just so that I could play stuff at runtime. It wasn't designed for that, and what would happen was it would go through and check all the tracks in the network, Additionally, it would sometimes lose track of the tracks, and I would have just tons of actor buildup. So it wasn't worth pursuing, and I was like, well, what's another kind of simple vehicle that I can make? And the airship was something that I settled on. Here's some other projects I tried in a completely different vein. I don't have the code for this one anymore because of a hard drive failure, but this was Time Attack. The idea was you'd have multiple characters, each with their own separate like timeline. So right here, we're gonna see a red character move, and then a blue character move, and a green character move. If they didn't, if their timeline couldn't exist, it stopped and it moved it back, so you can kind of see where they were in the timeline. Red character picks up this cube and walks all the way back over here. As we move back, it's blue at this point, at frame 336. Red was there, but blue it hasn't been over there yet. Blue broke this bridge, so now red gets frozen and at 420, and it happens to be that they can't cross because it was a paradox in their timeline when they thought they'd cross. And then green, is witnessing both events happen again, and then jumps off to their end. The project I was really excited about this one. It just ended up being that I had to, each object that I created in the world and every new system, I'd have to go back and add new data to every single other object. It was so difficult to actually kind of scale this one up from a coding perspective. So if I wanted to add like a player inventory, I had to store the state of every player inventory across every time frame to see what could and couldn't happen. I understand why now a lot of games just have like only where the movement was of an object and not what the player was doing at a time in their full state. This next project was a Paper Mario style game. The idea was that I was building an animation system for the 2D paper. I had a dialogue system where you could start and have like pre-made dialogue trees. Then you can enter combat and there'd be interactions here. The combat's a little broken at this point. I had started this project and stopped mostly because the artist I was working with had left the project. So that was kind of the crux here, was having this other artist make a lot of these assets. As soon as they left, I had abandoned this. This last project is one I'm still actively working on. It's a map selector for a Pavlov VR for custom servers in Pavlov. Right now, you can write a bunch of map names to a file, and it just rotates through those, so you don't have really too much control as you're actually playing the game and monitoring the server. You could write some tools to call it on a backend, and we just made it a front-end interface for that. So how this works is I have some debug tools to do this all in the editor, but the player joins the server. When they join, they're going to get some information associated with them. So right now we have Odysseus, who's an admin. The player can choose a team. There's some information. We have a way to make you register with our Discord server, so that connects your Steam to our Discord. So that way we know which team to move you on. We have custom voice channels for that. The player then looks down this dock and they can choose a map they want to go to. And so all the different maps plus random, that if you wanted to choose one, when you select it, it sends data off to a Flask server that's running on there. And it makes some Archon commands to call the server. So this is one that I'm actively working on. We're adding some features, like there's a knife fighting mode and other goofy things. It's for our team to actually practice on. And so it's a fun project that I'm continuing working on. Doesn't so much apply to my other stuff, but it's a lot of work and replication that I'm learning. Overall, I have a lot of different projects I've worked on over the years. A lot of them very, very much related. And it's funny to go back at them with the new knowledge and say like, wow, I could have actually finished that. Just kind of retackling the problem in a new way. If you are curious about any of them or want to know a little bit more about how they worked or would have worked, let me know. Now we just have to get back to the main game. Maybe implement some of the features from some of these now that I've revisited them again to see it. But yeah, thank you. Have a good one.